Okay, please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated. Madam Clerk, could I have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Christine Adamczak is absent tonight. Councilmember Linda Hammer. Here. Councilmember Michael Jasinski.
Here.
Councilmember Gerald Kaminsky.
Present.
Councilmember Brian Nowak.
Here.
Councilmember Brian Pilarski.
Present.
Supervisor Diane Benchkowski.
Here. Okay, we have 6 board members here tonight. Items of discussion. Tonight we have Carl Widmer from Drescher and Malecki here to give us our audit review presentation. Carl, and Madam Clerk, do you have his PowerPoint that you can put up? Thank you. You might have to speak into that microphone, though.
Should I just let you know when to switch? That work? All right. All right. Good evening, everyone. As Supervisor said, I'm Carl Widmer from Drescher and Malecki. I was the partner on the town's audit engagement for this year. Here tonight to present on the results of the audit for the fiscal year ended December 31st, 2022. So, as each year, we put together a short slideshow just to capture the real high-level financial performance for how the town did, and also reiterate what the deliverables of the products are from Drescher and Malecki each year of the audit. So next slide. Here it presents the products of our audit. Of course, the financial statements. This is what everyone is accustomed to seeing at the end of the audit. The town's financial statements are interesting in that you take that report and submit it to the Government Finance Officers Association, the GFOA, and apply for an award in financial reporting. So it's called an ACFR report, and we help the town put together a report it's pretty robust in comparison to other municipal financial statements as far as the information that's included, and adds a little bit of extra interesting information for a reader of the financial statements to go through. So each year we help the town put it together and then submit it for the award. That was issued and released on June 30th, which is the deadline for that report. Next is the single audit. This one is pretty important at the town. It's important at any municipality. Essentially, any municipality that receives and spends over $750,000 of federal grant money is required to have a single audit performed. And basically, Drescher and Malecki acts as an extension of the federal government, and we pull out their book of guidance and perform a compliance audit over how the town handled those federal funds. And that's called a single audit. So there were 2 programs this year that needed to be tested. Each year we test your Community Development Block Grant, CDBG program, just based on the dollar amounts that run through there each year. But this most recent year, for fiscal year 2022, was a new program introduced that had to be tested, and that was your ARPA money. So over $8 million was spent during the fiscal year. That program, the feds actually say, needs to be tested at a high risk. So we perform that audit, we take their guidance and run through, there's about 12 or 13 different compliance requirements related to how the town handles that program. We performed each of those 2 single audits and came to the conclusion that they were run appropriately and there are no compliance findings to report. So a good report card on the federal single audit. Auditor communications, management letter, those are typical annual communications that come through from the audit. Really just outlines what the town's responsibilities were, what Drescher and Malecki's responsibilities were, reiterates what's in our contract or our engagement letter to make sure both sides held up their end of the deal. Departmental report, there's a separate small financial statement that reports on the town's departments, which include the activities of the clerk, which includes tax receiver, the town justice, as well as the town rec. So Those books are kept on a different basis. It's called the cash basis instead of a modified accrual basis. It's a little bit easier to follow at the departmental level, but they get a separate report that's issued. Finally, there's the annual update document, or the AUD, if you've heard. New York State Comptroller's Office requires that every municipality in the state takes their financial statements and puts them into their software, the format that the state comptroller wants to see your financial information. So we help the town take your information out of your general ledger, your accounting software, and put it into the format that they want to see. And that was actually filed April 28th. It carries a May 1st due date. So we helped ensure that that was submitted. Moving on, we get to the financial statement update. Really, we put a separate slide here. That's just the placeholder for an introduction. We can move on. Basically, there are 4 larger funds at the town, that being garbage, sewer, highway, and general fund. We include 2 slides on each of those funds tonight. One of them is going to look at a 5-year trend of total revenues versus expenditures. And then the next slide for each of them is going to look through the equity position, the fund balance levels in each of those funds. So the first one that we look at here, if we could go back just one more, is the operations for the garbage fund. So each of these slides are going to cover the last 5 years. These are the audited financial statements put in a graph form here for each of these funds. What you can see here is the activity. The red line is your spending, your expenditures, pretty consistent with the prior year, both revenues and expenditures. Expenditures totaled about $9.4 million. Total money coming in was only $9.2. So on the next slide, you can take a look at that and say fiscal year 2022 decreased total fund balance by about $200,000, and that's what you'll see in your financial statements. So total fund balance went from 2.6 million down to 2.4 million. And then in this bar graph, we break it down by the different categories of fund balance that the town's required to report on in your financial statements. And that's all dictated by GASB, Governmental Accounting Standards Board. They write the rules. We help ensure that the town's financial statements follow those rules. So the different colors here are going to coordinate with the different categories of fund balance. And essentially it's how available or how liquid is that money. So your largest portion here, the blue at the bottom, it's called your assigned unappropriated. It's just that, it's unappropriated. It's not earmarked for anything in particular, so it's considered available. The ones above that carry some sort of designation or restriction to it. So looking at your available fund balance, the majority of your total fund balance is available, so that puts you in a good position should you encounter any challenge that you weren't anticipating, pretty similar to the prior year. So on the next slide, take a look at the sewer fund with a similar analysis. Total revenues and expenditures here. What you see is the blue line edged out your spending just by a little bit, about $300,000 more of revenue than there was of spending. On the next slide, how that affected total fund balance or your position. Here you see the bar graph increase just a little bit. That's that increase of $300,000 from 2022 operations. Again, your blue portion is going to represent that available fund balance. That's a little over half of the total fund balance composition here, and certainly in a healthy position compared to prior years and just overall based on annual spending. Next is the highway fund. Here you can see there was quite a gap just last year. For 2021, you can see the blue line was well above the red line as the town reported a larger surplus, and the main reason is sales tax. Sales tax is the primary revenue source in your highway fund, and that is, while it's volatile, you're not really in control for how much you're going to receive, it's been favorable as of recent years. So in 2021, you saw a real favorable increase in sales tax. Move forward to 2022, revenues held strong, still another good year of sales tax, but you saw your spending take a spike, and that's representing all of the emergency costs related to the blizzard. So snow removal, Salt, which also costs more, you needed more of it, overtime related to it, any additional help that you brought into the town to take care of that blizzard disaster, that was to the tune of over $4 million during this fiscal year. That wasn't anticipated. So that's the reason for the sharp increase in spending in the highway fund this year. So on the next slide, you can see the effects of that activity, where you see a decrease in the total fund balance here for 2022. It's down 2.3 million from last year. Last year, total fund balance was 12.4 million. At the end of 2022, 10.1. Again, you do focus in on that blue portion, the available portion, back to the more regular or typical levels that this fund has seen over the past few years. 2021, I would call it an anomaly when you receive sales tax like that and didn't have any requirements to spend it. So 2021, fortunate for the town, kind of set you up to help afford some of that disaster cost that you had with the blizzard in 2022. Finally, the main event, your general fund. You know, your other funds are spending $12, $10 million. General fund here, total spending was over $62 million. So the majority of the town's activity is being reported in your general fund. Here you can see the trend for the last 5 years has been a positive trend. You've been fortunate enough to bring in revenues ahead of expenditures, so that results in an increase to fund balance. 2022 is no exception. Revenues grew about $8 million from last year, but you see the red line trended just the same way. Expenditures went up almost the same amount, in fact, a little bit more. The big contributor to the increases on both sides is the town receiving that ARPA relief money of over $8 million. You received over that, but only spent about $8 million, and dollar for dollar, that was recognized with grant revenue. So while your expenditures went up $8-9 million, so did your revenues, because you were able to recognize that federal aid. Overall, fund balance went up $2.8 million. On the next slide, thank you. You can see total fund balance went up here. Here there are a few additional classifications. The general fund does have some of those restricted categories, and that was the main category that experienced the increase. So I had said total fund balance went up 2.8 million for the year. Almost all of that increase was put into restricted fund balance. Your restricted fund balance is comprised of a reserve that's set up for insurance. The town being self-insured, you want to be in a position to take care of anything that might be on the horizon. Not something that you would anticipate in the budget necessarily in any given year. So this money is there in the event you need to tap into it and it's a larger dollar amount. You have it here to take care of that issue. As far as your available fund balance, you do look at that in the general fund as well. 12.9 million is your blue portion here. That represents a common benchmark that a town will use is they'll take your available fund balance, so in this case 12.9 million, and compare it to the year's total spending. I mentioned before you spent just over $62 million for the year. That's about 20%. The town carries a fund balance policy that says you strive for 15% as a minimum level in general fund unassigned fund balance. You're at 20% this year, so you're meeting that town policy where you're striving for at least 15%. So you're satisfying that. That is, without getting into too much of the weeds of the financial statement, I mentioned before, it's a pretty robust report, like over 100 pages. I'd be happy to talk more about it. If you guys had individual questions, here's some of the contact information on the last slide there. Please feel free to reach out if you have any questions about it. But it was another good audit year, no reportable findings in internal control. We issued a clean, unmodified opinion on the financial statements, and everything met the required deadlines. So
Wonderful.
Thanks for your time. Everyone was really cooperative too. I don't know if I say that enough. The staff that we work with, Brian and his staff especially, they make it easy on us each year. Any questions tonight?
Any questions, board members? Anybody? Well, Carl, thank you for coming
Thank
out
you.
and giving us a clean report again this year. Appreciate it.
Have a good night.
Thanks, you too. Okay, our next presentation is from our new town assessor, Michael Milks. Michael, you have the floor. Just make sure you speak into the microphone. Did you give anything for Kim to put up?
I did, yes.
Good. Okay, perfect.
Okay, perfect. Good evening, everybody. So I was asked to come and talk about the 2024 assessment roll year. As of right now, our office has completed all of our sales review for up through July 1st, the valuation date for the 2024 roll year. Our contractor GAR is now doing a secondary look at all of those sales for usability, and then they're going to be using those sales to update our valuation models. And then later in the year, we'll be developing our action plan for 2024. We currently have GAR through the 2024 roll year, and we have an MOU with New York State that we would complete a cyclical reassessment, the first one being in 2021, the next one being for 2024. We do not have to be at 100%. That MOU is just, it's not legally binding, it's just an agreement to get the state funding that we got in 2021. If we hold 100% for 2024, or go to, since we're at 91, we could get state funding again for 2024.
But we don't have to, you're saying?
Correct.
We just wouldn't get any reimbursement for anything?
Correct. So that is kind of the highlights of where we're currently at. The second slide, I just went through a couple options that is available to you as the town board. We can keep resolution 2014-50, which holds the town at 100%. The second option is to adopt a different resolution, rescinding that 2014 resolution, which would keep the town on cyclical assessments, which would allow us to apply every 4 years for that state aid. We would do a townwide every 4 years, and that don't have to do the tweaking neighborhood work in between, and the non-reappraisal years. Or you could rescind the option, rescind the resolution from 2014 altogether without any sort of replacement. Just some points on that. Annual assessments at 100% have proven to be unpopular, as I'm sure you can attest with all the complaints that we got in 2022. The current real estate market is still very strong. Sales are still occurring at high dollar amounts. We just saw one that's listed for sale in the Pine Ridge area for over $400,000, which was a little bit of a different market for that neighborhood. So those sales that keep trending up, the assessments have to keep up with those sales in order to maintain that 100%. If we don't maintain 100, assessment work doesn't stop. It's not like we just stop working downstairs. There's still stuff that gets done each year, either to maintain a level of assessment determined by the assessor, or to just do the market analysis and go from there. Cyclical reassessments, other towns that do them, Clarence, Grand Island, are two, they give good feedback. I've talked to the assessors in both of those towns. The residents can count on it. They know when it's coming. You can do that PR work ahead of time to say, hey, this year's a reassessment year, next year's a reassessment year, or we're done for this year, you won't see another assessment increase for 4 years. So you can kind of, the residents can know when it's coming, and it's not a, will it happen this year, won't it happen this year? So it gives some stability. It also helps with budgeting, so I'm told I don't do the town budget, but I guess that helps. So the current resolution that you paused last year or earlier this year for the holds the 2014 resolution that expires in January, that holds the assessor to 100%. So I would be required to go to 100% this year. You're the town board, you're my boss, so you've got that resolution that says maintain 100, I'm gonna maintain 100. State aid isn't available if you do a reassessment and don't go to 100. That's probably only downside if we didn't maintain 100 for '24. My concern is we're still doing the work, we still have the contracts.
You
if the-
still need to know the full market value.
Correct,
So
we'll
you're-
still determine that regardless.
Yes, even though if we wouldn't change the assessed value, we would just, everybody would be at a certain percentage.
Assessments might change even if we hold 91, because we would still determine everyone's market value this year. Just because some of the models are outdated. As a new assessor, I wanted those updated with the current market, so we're not playing off of information from 2019, 2018. We would have current market sales from July 1st, 23, 22, 21, to kind of pull in that new information. We would still update market values. Some assessments may change. It's just, if you're at 100, the assessment's equal to the market value. If we maintain 90 or 95, we would apply that level of assessment to each of the market values we would determine. So the assessments could still change, but it just, if you're at 100, my fear is this year, just on our preliminary, I did that preliminary numbers, and it looks like those jumps are gonna be huge again, which was the big complaint in 2022. Because again, the way the state has the calendar year set up, we're looking backwards to go forwards.
Yes.
So we're looking at 23, 22, 21, as where when we did it in 22, that was 21, 2019. So the more
gotten
recent
even
you
more-
come, the higher those sales were.
Yes,
you
so
know?
it seems like in the recent years, since 19, it's gotten,
Yeah, it's just continued to go up. And right now, we're not seeing a decline in those sales prices. Some areas have leveled off, but those leveling off of sales are still higher than what we have the properties assessed at. So that would still cause them to see a major increase. So I just wanted to come today and talk about your options, since January will come quickly.
yeah.
And know what we're kind of going forward. I'm still developing a plan with GAR. We're still running numbers. I'll hopefully have that stuff in November. That's typically when we do that final analysis to know where we got to hit, or what we're looking at. But just to kind of put it on your plate to think about for now.
Okay, anybody have any questions for Michael?
Yeah.
Yeah, so speak right into that.
Michael, the state aid,
Mhm.
it's not available unless we're at 100%.
Correct.
So if we're at 100%, is that per property you get?
Yeah,
money?
you get a specific, I think it's like $5 per parcel.
$5?
Yes.
Okay.
We didn't get a lot, it was under 100 grand the last
I don't
reimbursement.
remember. I wasn't part of that process
Like 60, maybe
when Jill was the
Yes,
office
that's what
assessor.
I'm
so-
thinking, so it wasn't a whole lot to cover the whole, it costs more to do the whole
Yeah,
assessment at 100 rather than forego that reimbursement.
yeah,
really.
what the state aid offers. They don't, they don't offer non-reappraisal years, so if you're doing annual reassessments, the state doesn't offer funding for state aid on those non-reassessment years. It's only on every 4 years if you were to do a townwide to be at 100.
So if we entered into a new cyclical agreement, would that be then for the 2024 starting?
We could start with
And
24 and be
then
at
that would
100.
be,
It would pause for 3 years, and then we would go for another townwide on that 4th year.
Or we don't have to do the 100%?
Or we don't have to. Correct.
But we could still enter a cyclical agreement, right, or no?
Yeah, yeah,
But we wouldn't get reimbursed?
no,
But we could still do the
yes.
4 years?
My, with the cyclical reassessment resolution, if you were to go that route, I would just ask that you don't put a level of assessment on there like the 2014 one says, because then it puts the onus on the town board when it's me, the assessor, who's doing that determination.
I agree. And we
so-
might have to be flexible with this market the way it is, and,
Yeah, it gives me that
Forego
opportunity
that.
where if the jumps are going to be huge, I'm still establishing market value, so there's uniformity, there's fairness, that's all there. It's just maybe I'm not up going to 100. Maybe I'm holding 90. So that you still see an assessment increase, but it's not $70,000.
But if we rescinded that resolution from 2014, it would give you more flexibility every year to say,
Correct, to
well,
determine my LOA.
okay, now it's flattened out. At some point, it's going to.
Hopefully, yes.
Hope. So we don't need to be at a certain number.
Correct, it's up to the assessor. But this
Right, when
resolution
you
holds
see
me
a
at 100.
big change, then you can let the board know. And
Yeah, absolutely. I'll still be in contact. That doesn't change. It just gives me that opportunity to determine the LOA without having to land at 100.
Yeah, I think it just put us
I think
in a
it would
bad
have solved
spot.
some problems the last couple of years with this market if we had had that opportunity. So I'm just
The
looking to.
flexibility. So,
Yes.
All right, we'll look into it then, and, anybody else? Councilmember Noack?
Yeah, with the resolution we did earlier this year regarding the 100%, the board's already showed a desire for some flexibility. Now, I know real property law gives our assessor a lot of independence and a lot of power to make sole decisions. So suppose we don't want to do number one anymore, and the board's discussing options number two, number three. It's my understanding that if number one goes away, it's basically at the assessor's discretion whether it's to do cyclical or annual, unless the town board does a resolution or a local law that gives directive, right? So if we got rid of number one and took no action, you can essentially solely decide between two and three? That's my question.
No, I would still need to come to the board for funding for cyclical reassessments. We don't
Okay.
have the staff in the office to do a
Right.
townwide assessment.
I think too, is I had to sign the actual
Yeah, the
agreement, and I
contract
think
with-
there was a resolution to enter into the cyclical.
Yeah, with the
agreement.
state, yeah, the
Mhm,
MOU.
with the state.
I talked to the state reps today,
Mhm.
and they said it's not like legally binding. It just gives you
Yeah,
your
and-
opportunity to get your special franchise assessments
Mm-hmm.
and railroads at full value, as well as get the state aid in the year that you do the reassessment.
And regarding the state aid, let me think about a way to ask this. Depending on what we do next year, do we endanger aid we've gotten in the past, or we're
No.
free and clear on
Free and
that
clear.
previous aid?
Yeah,
Okay.
the only time they would go back at us for any sort of state aid is if they offered state aid during non-reappraisal years, which they don't do, so we're good.
Just wanted to clarify, okay.
Yeah.
Because we did back-to-back 21 and 22, 100%, and they only gave us for 2021.
21, yeah, which we then got in 22.
Yeah.
But it was only for the 1 year.
Any other questions from anyone? Councilmember Kaminsky.
What do you see in, aside from the residential? Have commercial properties still dropping, or have they leveled out?
Commercial properties appreciate slower than residential. So certain markets at certain times will depreciate, like office properties during COVID. That value plummeted. Hotels. That stuff is rebounding. Hotels faster than office, but they're not in decline so much. We do have a strong commercial valuation here in Cheektowaga. It's just they don't appreciate like a residential home does.
All right.
Typically, they're going to sell for very close to what we have them assessed at. And because our commercial has been so tight the last couple of years, we've only had like 2 new Article 7 cases this year, which is atypical. Usually we have 20. So I was pretty happy about that.
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, no problem.
Councilmember Jazinski?
So we couldn't rescind the 2014, but we also could do it cyclically after that, right?
Yeah, if you did the cyclical resolution, that would hold me then to do a cyclical townwide reassessment. It would just also give me the opportunity to establish that LOA in case we did see a market again in a couple years like we've seen the last
Right.
couple years. It still allows me to do uniform assessments, establish equity. It just doesn't hold me to 100%. So it kind of gives me that determination as the assessor.
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, no problem.
Anybody else? Thank you, Michael.
Yeah, no
So you want
problem.
to come back sometime in November?
Yeah, as soon as I get
So we
updated
can-
numbers, I can reach out and we can.
We'll think about this, and then you can come back to us and give us your suggestion how we
Sure,
should move
absolutely.
forward.
I'd be happy
Okay,
to.
So let me know when you're
Thanks.
coming, all right?
Okay.
Thank you very much. Let's go through the town board resolution items for tonight at 7 o'clock. I do not think we do not have any public hearings, so that's good. Resolution 1 is the transfer of funds. Resolution 2 is the warrant. Resolution 3 is the agreement, amend the agreement with MJM Electrical Construction for the modifications for the main pump station elevator. 4 is a notice of hearing for demolition of 37 McNaughton Avenue. Craig, is this a new one now? Yes. Okay, just give us a quick update, real quick. So, how long has this been vacant? And
37 McNaughton, as far as we've been told by the neighbors, been vacant for over 20 years. The building is in very poor condition, and I will have a full report for the public hearing.
Mm-hmm. Good. Okay, well, it's good to know that you're on top of these vacant buildings and we're getting rid of them if we can. Anybody else? Resolution 5 is the call for public hearing for a special use permit for 4814 Transit Road. Any questions on that? 6 is a development review for the 6386 Transit Road Phase 2 project. That's the young development project near Genesee Street. 7 is a special use permit for 6386 Transit Road Phase 2. 8 is the bond resolution for sewer bonding of $2,750,000. And 9 is the bond resolution for the installation of the LED streetlights. Looking for the amount there. $13,000. I'm 13 million, I'm sorry. 13 million for the bonding. 10 is the award of bid for the restoration of the existing wood cornice located at the roof line of Cheektowaga Town Hall. That came to a bid of price of $22,000. Award of bid is number 11 for electrical modifications for the Holtz Road pump station. That was $32,400. 12 is to reject the bid for pool maintenance chemicals for 2023. And then-
Supervisor,
Yes.
on that one, I just wanted to let the board know that the reason we're rejecting the bid and putting it back out was that there were folks that wanted to bid on it that received documentation after the bid opening. So the mail didn't get there in time. That's why we're doing this again.
Okay, well, that makes sense. It's better to have more than not enough. 13 is then the notice to bidder, so we're canceling the other one, and in 13, we're putting it out again for the pool maintenance, or pool chemicals. And 14 is a notice to bidders for controlled demolition with asbestos in place of 34 Virginia Road. 15 is the cybersecurity insurance renewal. 16 is an annual enterprise content management system maintenance renewal. This is all IT. 17 is our general code annual maintenance renewal. 18 is ImageMate online and Outpost software annual maintenance. 19 is Endpoint Management Solution Annual Maintenance, another IT. 20 is implementation of Housing, Economic, and Community Development Software. 21 is authorize the auction of surplus vehicles and equipment. Is, Jerry, can you answer questions on this? Have you, okay. What happened to the equipment? My understanding is sewer got some new equipment. Do you know anything about that, whether?
The dump truck from the sewer
Yeah.
department, somehow or another, was dying in this conversation about it. Everybody did, so, over, I don't know. So bad. Why did it happen?
Yeah, you're right.
Have you seen,
I haven't seen the new one, no.
you need to,
Nice.
nice. So neat, all polished, everything. Insane. Same with the backhoe, I have.
Oh, get your microphone.
The backhoe, I have no idea where it is.
We
And I
have
think
to,
there was also a van that was replaced, that one was in pretty rough shape. But from all the information I think that the board had back at that time, that this dump truck was on the verge of falling apart. So why is it still running the streets if it was that bad? You know, and it's relative to a lot of this. I don't think that truck had 100,000 miles on it. I see,
That's what I mean. I think we're replacing some of these. I know they age, but at the same time, they're commercial.
listen, let me do a real easy comparison for anybody. It's kind of like owning a boat here in Western New York or owning a boat in Florida. Which one realistically is older? The one in Florida. 6, 7 months out of the year, they sit here, they're parked inside a building in storage or whatever. And when you look at the mileage on these trucks, even all the years I've dealt with this, I see trucks every day in my shop, 200, 300, 400,000 miles. We can't get 100 out of them. It's absolutely insane and a total waste of money.
I agree. I think we just have to manage the inventory better and have the department heads.
Wait, do we have one? It's due at the end of this month.
Yeah, I know. Well,
But I
the
figured
one
I-
department is, yeah.
Right, but I figured I'd clue you in on these. Most of these, and I gotta give a lot of credit to the guys in the department. I looked at most of these vehicles. They're parts vehicles. Anything they could salvage, because we get so many, police cars are a prime example, we get a lot of bent wheels on them. So, new tires on a vehicle that the engine's gone in, and we strip the tires off at wheels. Anything that they can use in central garage is saving the town money. A lot of these vehicles are strictly parts, that's it. Most of them, I would assume, it would be too costly to put them back on the road.
And that's good, because some of those parts you can't get a hold of quickly anymore. So I'm glad to see they're doing that. And usually the police are pretty good with their inventory. They know exactly what they have and where that's moved. And I see some things from sanitation. Why would sanitation need a dump? Is it just because of the,
No, that was for sewer.
well, because it says sanitation right here. See number 7?
Yes.
Do you think that's a mistake?
Yeah, that auto car, that was a garbage bag. That's gotta be a typo.
So it's not a dump.
No.
We should correct that then.
Yeah. Yeah, I did not catch that.
So that's sanitation, but it's not a dump. It's more, what is it?
It's one of garbage packers, one of the old cab holders.
Okay.
Yeah, if you look at the VINs on 6 and 7, they're very similar. It's got to be the
Yeah.
same type of vehicle.
Okay, so Madam Clerk, can you make that modification on the resolution just to make sure they're both auto car expediter? Is it,
Yeah, that's a model.
not dump, so,
Yeah, but those are both garbage packers, from my understanding.
and anybody else, and then a few lawnmowers here, so, okay.
Yeah,
22?
basically, we
Yeah.
wanted to get those cleaned up before the bad weather comes.
Yeah, this is a good time to sell them, too,
Yeah.
if people are looking for maybe a used car for the winter. 22, authorize supervisor to execute agreement with the NFTA. 23 is authorize supervisor to execute public benefit services contract. 24 is authorize supervisor to execute another, did I just do that one? 25 is authorize supervisor to execute memorandum of understanding with Erie Community College Hockey. 26 is authorization of student interns in the police department. 27 is appointment of our Director of Emergency Services and Safety, Jason Tolzma. 28 is youth and recreation hiring. 29 is youth and recreation terminations. 30 is termination of a natural disaster coordinator. 31 is a termination of temporary administrative clerk. 32 is termination of part-time seasonal. And 33 is travel authorization for our police department. 34 is a special event for John F. Kennedy High School's homecoming parade. And we have a few waiver items. One is a transfer of sanitation department seasonal laborers to part-time laborers. 2 is a call for public hearing, local law introductory 2023-8 for the town code entitled Cannabis Establishments. And I think that's it for our regular meeting. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, with that being said, then, we need an executive session, motion to go into executive session to discuss, I should just say all of the town union contracts and possible sale of real property and attorney-client privilege. So we will come back. Do I have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. We're going to go into executive session. We'll come back for those